Hello and welcome to our Red Feather Mind Body Spirit event. I'm Christopher McClure, and today we have a fantastic guest artist, teacher, writer, Paula Scardamalia, who is most recently the author of Enchanting Creativity: How Fairy Tales, Dreams, Rituals, and Journaling Can Awaken Your Creative Self. I have it right here. We want to catch up today a little more about this amazing book and what's ahead. But first, a little background on Paula. Paula Chafee Scardamalia is a book coach and a dream consultant and intuitive, and the author of In the Land of Vultures and Tarot for the Fiction Writer. For 20 years, Paula has presented workshops across country at national and regional Romance Writers of America conferences and meetings, the San Diego University Writers Conference, and the International Women's Writing Guild. Since 2009, Paula has published Divine Musings, a weekly e-newsletter on writing, creativity, dreams, and tarot. She was dream consultant, I didn't realize this actually, for People Country magazine, which is really cool, and is the award-winning author of Weaving a Woman's Life, which I actually have. Somewhere on my bookshelf, I have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spiritual Lessons from the Loom. So it's great to have you here, Paula. We've known each other for a while, actually, over a decade.
Yes, we've known
We
each
met
other a long time.
a long time. We met at a tarot conference, actually, years back. So yeah, and it's interesting. You actually referenced that in the book. I saw you referenced that. Hey, this Schiffer person was at this conference, and this I didn't realize how long this book was in motion for you.
Yes, a long
So
time.
it's a
Yeah.
neat story. It's a neat story. So before we get too far down that, so what's your background, so that the people watching can understand a little bit more about you and what your background is and how you got into all of this. So.
Well, you gave a little bit of it. I have a Master of Fine Arts in writing and creative writing and weaving actually as well. I used images from weaving I did as part of my MFA work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I started there. I've always been a storyteller. In fact, I have a t-shirt on that says storyteller. Um, I've always been a storyteller from the time I was about 6 or 7 years old. I think I made my first book then, self-published before it was a thing. And just loved stories. When the kids in school were complaining because they had to write something, I was writing something. So
Mhm.
loving it.
Wonderful.
And yeah, so got married, had kids, was still writing, and then I got into weaving
Mhm.
and was a professional weaver, selling at I was exhibiting at craft shows across the country, selling in markets in Japan and Europe and South America, and got to a point where I'd had enough of that. And but
No.
through all of that, I continued to write. And I've written for Fairy Magazine, for Crafts Report, which are, were small magazines, print magazines at the
Mhm.
time.
Sure.
So did a lot of writing and then got into studying dream work with Robert Moss, you know, and started teaching dreams for writers at the International Women's Writing Guild conferences. And so, one thing, it's like stepping stones, Chris, and you've probably experienced this
Mhm.
yourself. You
Sure.
start out one place, take a next step, take a next step. And so one of the reasons I was so happy to do this book was because it wove so many of the different parts of my life and my experience together.
Right. I totally understand that. And weaving is what you do, and also a theme in your life, it seems like, is you're continually weaving things into it uh,
Right.
to create a magnificent tapestry.
Tapestry. There you
Tapestry of your
go.
life. Okay, great, thank you. Exactly, which is your life. So it's really fascinating. And the way this is really different than other books. It's so much in there. It's creativity in general. So, but then you have the journaling aspect. You have the dream aspect, which is incredibly important to this, and relying on your muse, all of that. So, like, what do you feel makes this different than other books on, I guess, creativity? It's hard to define almost. Well, it is and it isn't. It's straight up a book on creativity, but a very unique way to get into it and really prepare yourself for being creative too. So,
Yes, and I think it's because of the elements that are in. In fact,
yep.
in preparation for this, I was doing some research on Amazon, and when you search under creativity on Amazon, you come up with 40,000 entries,
Right.
you know.
Sure.
But if you put in creativity and dreams, I'm like one of the top, that book is one of the top 10. If you put in creativity and rituals, creativity and journals, it comes up really fast because, and then when you put all of those together, it makes it really unique. And of course, all of those things are so important as part of it in my experience and in my work with others is so important as part of the creative process.
Definitely. But the capstone to this, or what's throughout with this, is the fairy tale. The fairy tale
Yes.
phase of it. It's the whole structure kind of the book, and I really like
Right.
the way that it moves throughout the book. Like each chapter start is a different part of the, not to give it away, but is a different part of a fairy tale. But you take that part and you explain how that relates to your creativity, which is really, I think, brilliant. And so what? So I guess that's part of the question. Like, why is that? Why you chose Sleeping Beauty? I should say. Is that why you chose that fairy tale in particular, or I mean, I'm sure there are aspects of it in other fairy tales too.
Well, I've actually, in my newsletter, I've done a series, and also I have an idea for another book on fairy tales and how it relates to the creative process.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah.
and I've done, Cinderella, I've done
Okay.
Rapunzel, I've done, I've worked with all those fairy tales, but Sleeping Beauty was the first one to really speak to me with the idea of the creative process because. And at one point, this book was actually called The Kiss of Creativity.
Okay.
Because you have the kiss that wakens Sleeping Beauty from her slumber. And it's that
Right.
idea of bringing together the more feminine, receptive inner work of the creative together with the more active outer work of the prince in that kiss of creativity. And somehow that fairy tale just really talked about the creative process to me.
No, that makes that's a great explanation of why. But yes, you do reference other fairy tales in this, different where they have numbers pop up sometimes in fairy tales and
Yes,
those kinds of things, and so that's really quite interesting. And so with each of these, but again, you use Sleeping Beauty as a main focus, to move someone through the text. Then for each one you kind of like cap that off with things you can do like action items.
yes.
So with the journal work and the ritual work and the dream work. So what made you think of that? How did that piece of it come together, really?
Again, well, I'm a Capricorn moon.
Okay. All right.
So I like to take all the mystical and mythical and make it practical. All right. So those AL ending words. And it's also like if you're, for those who are familiar with the tarot, it's that magician where you take the idea and you manifest it in physical form or make it real.
Right.
And so it's really good to think about these ideas, to read the fairy tale, to see how it applies to the creative process. But then how are you going to apply it? How are you going to make it real? And the tools that tuning into the dream work, which we need to do so much more than we do. Listening, creating rituals, which are bridges into that creative work and into the inner self. And then the journaling, which helps us discover, so much about what's going on internally, as well as processing externally. All of those things, again, weave together to really allow us to be creative in a more fulfilling, more deeply in touch kind of way.
Right. Exactly. It's funny. I saw you a couple weeks ago in person, and I mentioned, oh yeah, I had this dream where I was where I had to get a mead composition book, and you were so excited that I got this. I went out and got it, and I had been using it and trying to capture. It's elusive though, trying to capture dreams and what they mean, and it's going to mean different things for different people, and you have to kind of discern that as well. So, but you take someone step by step on kind of how to do that better. Really,
Yes.
what are the things you recommend actually for being able to capture that? Is there anything specific that like you would?
Well, there's lots of things. First of all, you have to set the intention that you're going to,
Right, right.
And so when you set that intention, how do you manifest that intention? Well, you get yourself a journal, you get yourself a pen so you can keep it by the bed, or you have a recording device or whatever, so that when you wake, you can record the dream.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing, is a little tip I tell people is when you wake from a dream, if you want to remember it, don't move.
Yes. I read that and I hadn't practiced it, and I gotta get better at that. I really want to get better at it. So
Yeah.
like even this morning, I was like, oh, I dreamt something, and then like I woke up early and was like, oh, I gotta remember that. And then I woke up, I was like, what do I need to remember? I know I remember something. Anyway, so it's yeah.
Well, another way, after you don't move and
Yes.
you've had a dream, is
Right.
to give it the easiest, quickest thing is to give it a title.
Oh,
Not
okay.
a Pulitzer Prize winning title, just a title.
Sure, something, yes.
Yeah, and then you can, if you want, you can play it back in your head a couple times. You can, use mnemonics, little tricks to remember, put points on your fingers so you remember you had, a handful of ideas. And so when you do wake up finally in the morning, you're ready to get up out of bed and record it, then you've got something. You probably have the title, and then the other thing I tell people when they're going to write down the dream is to record it in present tense.
Yes, I read that. I already do that. So when I read that, I was like, oh yes, that's it is what I do. Not like before, it's like I was doing this thing or this thing happened or whatever. Yes,
Right.
right.
No. And the reason you do it in present tense is you'll discover that it puts you more immediately into the dream so that it's easier to draw on the thread of the dream and put you, recapture things. You'll find that when you record that way, you'll remember something you may have forgotten about it.
Okay, all right. Actually, I say that maybe I haven't been doing it wrong. Anyway, so thank you. That's all.
So instead
Yeah.
of the brown dog chased me through the streets, it would be the brown dog is chasing
It's
me through the
Jason.
streets, and I see a light and
Mhm.
I open the door. So it's all in present tense.
Right, right. Okay, that's a great advice, and I think that would certainly get you yeah right back into like the immediacy of it as you're walking through, and I'm sure it'll help you remember more too.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And then another thing for people who have trouble remembering their dreams is when they wake up is to register, even write down what's what did you wake up with a tune in your head? Did you wake up with
Mhm.
a poem or a title? How are you feeling when you wake up?
Mhm.
Because emotions are often key to what's been going on in the dream work. So
Mhm. That's really key. And something that's also key is once you find those systems that work for you, it's the practice of it, where you definitely so you have to practice it. You have to keep doing it. When I fall down on that, I'll get these spurts where it's like, oh, yes, I'm going to do it, and then I won't do it for months, and then I'll get a. So I'm sure I'm
well,
always in that.
it's like anything else, I journal at night before I go to bed.
Mhm.
And I've been doing, I used to journal in the morning, I used to journal at other times, but for the last year, I've been journaling every night before I go to bed. And I
Mhm.
have skipped, my husband and I were in Italy for several weeks, and I skipped a couple nights there because I forgot. And I skipped one or two nights when I was on another trip. But
Okay.
I take it with me and I try to remember. And I have skipped very few nights because it's much easier to break a habit than it is to create a habit. So once you get into it, if
It
you
is.
stay with it.
It is. Yeah. Even past like the 20, the old 21 day or 28-day thresholds or whatever.
Right.
With different things I've attempted. It's like, okay, I made it to 21, and now I made it to 28 in there, and still you have to keep. It's not like, oh, I got this now. You have to make it a part of your like
Yeah,
you
you
like
really
you
do.
can't right like you can't not do it. Basically, you have to get to a point like, oh, I missed it now, and I have to do it. We feel guilty, and I need to make myself feel guilty about things.
Yeah, well, we don't want that either,
I'm just joking. Yeah. So, but no, that's a very important. And then the persistence to do it on a regular basis as well. And it's something that I haven't heard before is just the curiosity of what can come out of what you're doing there too, which gives you that glimmer of joy of what you're doing too. I think is vitally important. And kind of like, and you weave that here into how the princess goes and she is curious, and then she pricks her, finger and everything, and not to give the fairy tale away or ever, but hopefully everyone's familiar with the fairy tale. But yeah, so and that sets off the chain. Well, actually, then that continues the chain of events there, but it's part of the process. And
Right.
you kind of call that an initiation even into the process.
Yes, yes. And that curiosity, I mean, part of being a dreamer and a creative then is responding curiously to the dream and then seeing what the dream can do. So, there's a book called Writer's Dreaming by Naomi Epple. It's all about people like Stephen King and William, who wrote Sophie's Choice, and Sue Grafton, and a whole bunch of writers who've used dreams to propel them into story. Isabel Allende, a lot of them. And the same is true. You think about William Blake, who used a lot of his imagery for his artwork came out of dreams.
Yes.
All right. Same thing with Salvador Dali.
Right.
So, the dreams, I mean, talk about one of the best cures for creative block.
Oh, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of the best. And you reference other ones too, like tarot and things, and just ways to get you out of those creative blocks, and then but the you look at a couple of different ways. I mean, you describe it kind of as your muse a little bit, and getting into that and reading those signs and signals there. But it's a great line in here that I wanted to highlight too. Your creative ideas are not meant to lie sleeping in your mind and imagination forever. So they want to come out. Those ideas want to come out, and it's just a matter of tapping into the way to make that happen, really. And it takes persistence. But you've really outlined some really neat ways to do this, including actually even creating a sacred space. How is that done? I think that's really vitally important.
It is vitally important because one of the things that's important to remember is how sacred creativity is.
Right.
And in that process, each of us becomes a god or goddess in that creative moment, And so it's easy to forget when we get caught up in the work of creating, in the work of marketing and promoting and everything, that there is that divine sacred element to it. Yeah. And, you can't see it, but over here, I have a little altar area with a candle, a crystal ball, a fairy. There's a nice wood chest that my husband made for me that holds my fountain pens because I write my first drafts in fountain pen.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Cool.
So this book was written in fountain pen.
Really?
Yeah. And then I have another container that holds some of my favorite tarot decks, so recognizing, and then, lighting a candle. And that's part of what I was talking about with rituals in there too, is rituals help you bridge from one state to another, from one place. Here I am, the mother cooking the meal. Now I want to go paint. So a ritual to help me bridge from there to here and into that divine space of creativity.
Right. So crossing those different thresholds then is important. And I like how you even like when you're on the road, you mentioned you have a little setup you take along.
Yes.
So not that it's a secret, it's in the books, it's not a secret. So you have a little thing that you bring along for just to make sure that you get in those spaces.
Just a little jewelry box with a little owl who's like my animal guide, my animal spirit.
Right.
And a couple of little crystals. I may take a little travel candle, all those things that, so if I sit down to write or to journal, or even to prepare myself before entering dream space, I have what I need to do it.
Exactly. So within all this, and you've woven an incredible life here. So who's really inspired you along this journey, would you say?
Well, I've been thinking about that, and I have to say my parents.
Okay.
And the reason is that my mother, who died when I was 32. She was 53. She was an art teacher and an artist.
Oh, okay.
So, and in fact, I've gotten into watercolor in the last year and a half, and I'm using some of her brushes in the process.
Wow.
Yeah, which is very, it's very rewarding to be able to do that.
Oh, sure.
And So I learned to to appreciate color and composition and the arts through her. She loved art. She loved, we went to museums because of her. She loved music. We always had music in the house.
Yeah.
And then over here's my father, who was very active for a period of time in a church, in a national church organization, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And he loved his flower. He used to love his flower gardens. And I would be, as a teenager, washing dishes after our family meal, and my father would come running into the house. We lived on a hill outside a small village. He would come running into the house. Come outside, come outside. You got to see the sun. And so we would go outside and the sun would be setting and it would be a beautiful sunset.
Yeah.
He would take us on walks through the woods and we would find the first dogtooth violets and the pussy willows. And so through him, I began to experience the divine
Mm-hmm.
in nature and the beauty in nature. And later, after my mother died and he had remarried, he
Okay.
took painting lessons.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
yes, and he painted in acrylics, and we over the period of time he painted over 100 paintings. And
Really?
my stepsister made a book of all those images that we now have, and some of his paintings now are in a vet residence in Chicago. So
That's
it's
right.
it's
Yeah.
kind of in the genes.
It's in the genes. Exactly. So with that said, what if someone were to pick this up, what would be the one thing that you wouldn't want to take away from this book? If there's just one thing that you could have them take away from it.
It's that magic
Mhm.
and the divine exist everywhere and in them, in you. All right.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter whether you're baking a cake, parenting a child, fixing a car, writing a book.
Mhm.
The creative spark, the divine spark is there. And one way of accessing it is through fairy tale, through myth, through dreams and ritual and journaling.
Yeah, that's perfect, really, and that's what I got out of it in my own reading. It's fun for me to because I remember this. I think we talked about it once, and then saw a manuscript or whatever. But then sometimes it evolves over the process.
Right.
It's really fun for me to see them. I call it when they come off the line. So what the finished work is like too, because sometimes
Yes.
it's very different and see how it evolves too. And this has evolved incredibly well. So anyway, with the images in it too, by Ciro Marchetti, I believe, were the images
Yep.
throughout
Yeah.
this.
Chiro provided the images. Yes.
Just fantastic. And so yeah, and even the choice of I'm going to kind of publish nerdy here. The choice of fonts is fantastic.
Well, you're the designer. It's Barbara, right? If I remember correctly, she did my last book, so I asked for her
okay.
specifically because
Yeah, gotcha.
she has a deft touch when it comes to book design and formatting.
Which is quite correct there. So
yeah.
Yep. So yeah, I got a ton out of this, and that will try and weave into my own experience of accessing what I need to. So I really even the way you kind of summarize everything with the C words. You have to have your is the couple and the community, then the commitment, then and the celebration, and then leads to creativity. So understanding those different aspects of things and bringing it together, I think, is really important. I think it's a good primer for tapping into that creativity in a very unique way and compelling way. It kind of begs to be read, and I like the way kind of really. I would read it again. I will read it again probably because I'm sure I'll get something out of it next time.
Well, and I hope that readers will use it and keep coming back to it, because the exercises, the journaling exercises, a reminder of the rituals that they can do, and reference that so that it continues to be helpful to them in the process.
I'm sure it will be. So what lies ahead for you, Paula?
Well, I have another idea for a book.
Oh, you're kidding. I'm amazed.
Yes, really, I know. Well, it's interesting because, of course, I write both fiction and nonfiction. So the nonfiction I see as a companion to this book. The idea of like a dream journal and creative project planner and stuff. But I also, right now, I'm finishing revisions and editing on a novel that's called The Tempting Voice, and it has to do with the Greek muses.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
you can see myth. And then I'm working on a tarot cozy mystery.
A tarot cozy mystery?
Yes.
Tarot.
Yes.
We'll have to
And
talk after about that.
what?
We'll have to talk after about that, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And then of course I'm continuing to teach. So I'm doing I'm doing an online workshop right now for a chapter of the romance writers on called Awakening the Imagination. And talking about dreams and fairy tale and some of those elements in there. So
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, you're always into something fascinating. Really, never a dull moment for you.
right. No, I never get bored.
Never get bored. I believe you. If people want to contact you or see what you're up to, are you on social media or
Yes.
website? Okay.
Yes. And I have two websites. One is diviningthemuse.com.
Right.
And the other one is under my author name, Paula Chafee Scardamalia. So I have two, and they can find the social media links on there. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram. I have two accounts on Instagram, one for the author and one for Divining the Muse. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm
Wonderful.
out there. I haven't gotten into TikTok yet, though.
Okay. Me either. For let someone else do that because that's not my. So, but hey, well, who knows? You probably would though. You might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm considering it.
At
I'm
some point,
researching it
yeah.
right now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. So, all right. Well, it's been great talking with you, Paula. Thanks for coming here. And for everyone who watches this, then it actually published today on recording this on the 27th of September. So it's out now. So it's available on redfeathermbs.com. So it's Enchanting Creativity, How Fairy Tales, Dreams, Rituals, and Journaling Can Awaken Your Creative Self. So wherever books are sold, you'll be able to get it. And please do get it because it's a wonderful book. So thanks so much again, Paula.
Thank you for having me, Christopher.
My pleasure. Be well all.